Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming on this wonderful occasion in this beautiful building, a little bit more about which I'll have to say in just a minute. And thank you for your patience. There's a very important rally that has been organized by the Indigenous Student Council that was announced just yesterday. But because of the way things have happened in terms of events recently, it had to be announced only yesterday, and it was very important for the students. They wanted to start it here. They're going to get a police escort as part of their march down to the courthouse, and so we wanted to delay this a little bit in honor of that important event as well. So thank you for your patience, but I think it's time for us also to begin. My name is Peter Stoicheff. I'm president of the university, and it is always my pleasure to be able to introduce our former wonderful president, Peter McKinnon, on any occasion, and this is a special one. As we gather here today, many of you, maybe not all of you, know this. We always feel it important to say that we acknowledge we're on Treaty 6 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to our First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place, and we reaffirm our relationships with one another. That's a statement that we make at the beginning of all important gatherings on this campus. This afternoon's event marks the final book launch in our U of S Canada 150 series of book launch events. We're holding this very special event as one of our U of S Canada 150 initiatives, and there were many projects under that rubric that aimed to celebrate our achievements over our 110-year history as a university, and also to envision a future that truly reflects who we are as a community and as Canadians. In this series, we have highlighted 3 books so far, one by renowned U of S historian Jim Miller. It was a book on reconciliation. Another was about one of our most illustrious alumni, former judge and land claims chief adjudicator Ted Hughes. And a third book was by U of S professor emeritus Bob Calder, and it told the story of a group of shipwrecked Spaniards washed onto the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in 1512, leading to first contact between the Spanish and the Maya. And it's a book that has implications far beyond the Yucatan. Those book launches and celebrations we held in the fall, and we're absolutely delighted that our special guest for this 4th book launch in the series is U of S President Emeritus, Peter McKinnon. It is fitting that the launch of this book is being held right here at the Gordon Oaks Red Bear Student Center because Peter played a primary role in establishing the strategy and the political will to build this wonderful center that now plays such a key role in the life of our university, and this is Peter's first time formally in this wonderful space. So I'm really privileged to be able to hold this launch here, and Peter, for you to be here in the space that you were so instrumental in building for us. We just had a 2-hour smudge here yesterday morning from 9:30 to 11:30. It was a great healing event for a couple hundred students, faculty, staff, and administrators. A really, really wonderful, needed event that was led by an elder of ours, Louise Haff, and many, many important things go on in this center. In fact, I was saying to Louise Haff earlier today, I could not imagine how we could have held that smudge in the way that we did had we not had the Gordon Oaks Red Bear Center as the venue for it. While Peter has previously co-edited 3 books, this is Peter's 2nd book since he left the U of S. I'm always quick to say it's part of a trilogy. We had the privilege as a university of honoring his first book, University Leadership and Public Policy in the 21st Century, A President's Perspective on Campus. That was in 2016 in the Johnson Troyama School for Public Policy at the Diefenbaker Center. That book drew on Peter's 13 years as president of the University of Saskatchewan, as well as the teachings he gleaned from those whom he considered to be some of the finest university presidents in Canadian history. Peter had a unique vantage point for that book, having served as chair of the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada, now Universities Canada, from 2003 to 2005. Published by University of Toronto Press, that book looked at key policy issues affecting Canada's university sector, including academic freedom, strategic planning, tuition policy, labor relations and governance, as well as partnerships and commercialization. His latest book, also published by University of Toronto Press, is titled University Commons Divided: Exploring Debate and Dissent on Campus. It looks at the idea of the university as a commons, quote unquote, a site for debate, discussion, and collaboration. It is both a timely and bold examination of the pressures that are transforming the culture and governance of universities, in particular the issues around freedom of expression and dissent on campus. This is a topic of national importance. After stepping down from the U of S in 2013, Peter served as interim president of Athabasca University in Alberta from 2014 to 2016. He is the recipient of honorary degrees from Dalhousie University, Queen's University, Memorial University, the University of Regina, the University of Victoria, and the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. He is also an officer of the Order of Canada. He has served on the Prime Minister's Advisory Committee on the Public Service and on the Federal Science, Technology and Innovation Council. He was named the first recipient of the Prime Ministers of Canada Fellowship, an initiative of the Public Policy Forum to enhance governance in Canada. Peter will discuss his book and then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. Please join me in welcoming Professor Emeritus Peter McKinnon to the podium.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that introduction, and thank you as well for hosting the event on this site. It's a wonderful place and space, as you said, and as we all know. I also want to acknowledge a few other persons who were critical to this event. I should tell you that Cheryl Avery in the archives encouraged me to hold the event on the University of Saskatchewan campus. And since that time, of course, Catherine Warden has gone to work, and when she goes to work on the details and on the organization, it's a terrific thing to see and to experience, and I am very grateful to her, to Sandra Duarte, to Marcy Hildebrand, who worked with her on this event. So thank you to them for the local organization of this launch. I also do want to acknowledge at the outset, Peter mentioned it, but I'm enormously fortunate to have worked with the University of Toronto Press on this. The editor that I dealt with, I wish all writers could have an editor of the capacity and the enthusiasm and the attentiveness of Daniel Quinlan, the production editor Wayne Harrington, the copy editor Ian McKenzie, the anonymous readers, two of them, the manuscript review committee reader. They all made contributions to this work. They all helped me make the work better, and I thank them. I want to thank all of you for coming out today. I didn't know what kind of numbers to expect. I'm just thrilled to look out and to see so many faces of people that have meant so much to me over the years. Thank you very much for being present today. Shortly after the publication of my previous book a few years ago, Peggy Schmeiser, who is here today, encouraged me to write on contested space in the academy. And this volume actually is the result. I'm not going to summarize the book or read excerpts in the presentation. Rather, I'm going to focus on one of its 7 chapters. Chapter 3 is titled Safe Space, Comfort and Freedom of Expression. And in writing it, I was preoccupied with 5 questions that I shall outline for you. But let me preface my questions with this brief introduction. Students of free speech and expression will recall the old example that one is not free to falsely shout fire in a crowded theater. The example is important for two reasons. First, it was discussed, in my experience, as a singular or rare exception, apart from what is prescribed by law, to a right to speak freely. Second, it informs us that in general, freedom of expression is to be curbed only in anticipation of imminent and real harm. A false alarm of fire in a crowded theater will send patrons stampeding to the exits, with the likelihood that some will suffer bodily harm or perhaps even death. The danger is foreseeable, it is tangible, and it is imminent. Along with this example, we should note, too, that since 1982, the Canadian Constitution has enshrined freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression as a constitutional right. It is subject only to such limitations as are demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. Although there is debate about the reach of the Charter into universities, the message of both the fire in the theater example and the Charter is clear. Freedom of expression is a powerful, historical, and contemporary constitutional value that should yield only in the most compelling circumstances. With this introduction as our starting point, I wish to offer my 5 questions. And I do so because the questions should stimulate all of us, I think, to reflect upon them, and there may be disagreement, there inevitably will be. But these are the 5 questions that I was concerned about as I worked on Chapter 3. Question 1, is freedom of expression under threat on Canadian university campuses? Is freedom of expression under threat on our university campuses? Let me remind you, and it is a reminder only because you will have heard of many or most of them, of some of the freedom of expression controversies over recent years. Example 1, Benjamin Netanyahu is prevented from speaking at Concordia University by pro-Palestinian demonstrators. The university bans events relating to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Example 2, the University of Ottawa cancels Ann Coulter's scheduled speech because of boisterous demonstrations that sponsors feared might turn violent. Example 3, the University of Calgary disciplines anti-abortion demonstrators when they refuse to turn their posters inward so that bystanders would not have to see them. Example 4, students at University of Toronto and Brock University are denounced for racism because of their use of blackface as part of their Halloween costumes representing the Jamaican bobsled team that participated in the 1988 Winter Olympics. Example 5, Queen's University students were condemned for attending an off-campus costume party wearing what were described as stereotypical national costumes. Example 6, an artistic representation of the Israeli-Palestine issue leads a prominent philanthropist to withdraw support from York University if it is not removed. Example 7, a University of Ottawa yoga class was discontinued because yoga was said to have been taken from its originating cultures through oppression and cultural genocide due to colonialism and Western supremacy. Example 8, a Laurentian University professor is pulled from his section in introductory psychology because he asked his students to acknowledge his warning that he used profanity in class for pedagogical reasons. Example 9, a University of Toronto psychology professor is told that he must use genderless pronouns when asked to do so. Example 10. A Ryerson University school director stepped down after the university's Black Liberation Collective demanded his resignation for a violent act of anti-blackness, misogyny, and misogynoir when he left an anti-racism meeting on campus. Example 11. McGill's Andrew Potter resigned under pressure as director of the university's Institute for the Study of Canada after writing a Maclean's magazine story describing Quebec, and I quote, as an almost pathologically alienated and low-trust society deficient in many of the most basic forms of social capital that other Canadians take for granted. Example 12. A Laurier University concession operator was expelled from space he had rented from the Graduate Students Association for years when he produced a tongue-in-cheek help-wanted ad seeking a slave to help run his cafe for pay that was crap. The university supported the decision in the interests of making the university, quote, an inclusive, welcoming, and respectful place. Example 13. UBC canceled a speech by CEO of 2010 Vancouver Olympics on the basis of unsubstantiated allegations of sexual assault alleged to have occurred 4 decades earlier. Example 14. Students at St. Francis Xavier University and elsewhere objected to guest speaker appearances by Marie Heinen, John Gomeshi's defense lawyer, who defended him successfully against charges of sexual assault. And most recently, and you'll remember this well, 15, a communication studies teaching assistant at Laurier University was summoned, harangued, and reprimanded by 2 professors and another university official for showing a video clip of U of T's Jordan Peterson defending his unwillingness to use gender-neutral pronouns. 15 examples, 15 years, and there are many, many more, and they occur as we continue our deliberations. You must at least admit that these examples are a long way from the shouting fire in a crowded theater example. It is a stretch to identify foreseeable, tangible, and imminent danger in any of them. Instead, we see a number of other reasons advanced for curbing freedom of expression. No free speech for hate speech. A need for safe space. Protection from offense. Countering racism. Countering sexual assault. Countering cultural misappropriation. Upholding equality. Nurturing a respectful and supportive environment. And the list goes on. The question, and it's a question for you and for me, is whether these and other examples are simply passing episodes of the normal contentiousness of academic life, of little concern to anyone other than the protagonists, or do they illustrate threats to freedom of expression? Question 2 of my 5 questions. If freedom of expression is threatened in these and other examples, why is this happening? Are the stipulated reasons that I just enumerated compelling? Are we experiencing a changing social fabric that puts new pressures on traditional perspectives and understandings? Or both? Are these welcome incursions on free expression in a changing world, or do they threaten to undermine vital and enduring values? Question 3. Who is to decide these issues? Who is to decide these issues? Surely we cannot leave it up to the demonstrators, the offended persons, the self-appointed arbiters of virtue, to make the necessary distinctions and decisions. Whatever limits we choose to place on freedom of expression must arise from a reasonable determination that they are necessary, they must be imposed by legitimate authority, and must be defensible according to the laws and constitutional values of the land. Question 4. What are defensible limits on freedom of expression in universities? What are defensible limits on freedom of expression in universities? Context matters. The ultimate venue for free speech is the street, where those on the street can hold any opinions they wish and can express whatever opinion they hold, as long as they don't disturb the peace or otherwise transgress the laws of the land. But once we move from the street into almost any other context, there are constraints upon free speech, whether formal or informal, official or unofficial. They may be grounded in law, as they are in Canada with incitement of hate or obscenity, contraventions of hate and obscenity laws. They may be contractual. They may be grounded in employment or even in convention. Our context, of course, is the university. And in this setting, freedom of expression must be a paramount value. But this is not Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park that we're talking about. Freedom of expression in the university is about dialogue, not monologue, and is a two-way street. And so we must protect the exchange of ideas and perspectives as well as speech itself, and university people must behave accordingly. This requires civil attention to the ideas of others, and therefore the defensible limits on freedom of expression in universities are those necessary to ensure the health of dialogue as well as speech. And the faculty and staff of the university are right in the front lines of ensuring that kind of respect in the way in which they deal with the issues that arise in the classrooms and in the other locations in the university. So what are the limits? Clearly here we are more in the realm of politesse than we are in the domain of regulation. We cannot prejudge, we cannot be prescriptive, and we cannot promise refuge from uncomfortable ideas. So what can we do? And that brings us to question 5 and to a repetition of my comment of a moment ago. You, faculty, staff in the university are very much in the front lines here. Universities have to be prepared. I think some of the examples that we have seen are examples of universities not prepared for the kinds of controversies that arose in their midst. Universities are deliberative bodies, thinking bodies, and they must take the time to deliberate and not be overcome by the clamor for action now. I was intrigued, and you'll remember it well, I'm sure, with the Dalhousie dentist's Facebook scandal. Within a very short period of time after that case broke, there were 50,000 names on an online petition. I'm talking here of days, not weeks, hours. 50,000 names online calling for the immediate expulsion of the 13 members of this Facebook group. There were another 45,000 saying, take the issue out of the university commons. We need an independent investigation from outside of just what went on here. And if what went on is as serious as we think it is, then academic capital punishment, expulsion, is the appropriate outcome. The president of Dalhousie, Richard Florazone, said in the midst of this great clamor, I'm going to take 48 hours to consult with people and to reflect upon how to deal with this issue here. And he was heavily condemned at the time for doing that. You got to get out in front of this thing. You got to make the decisions critical. He took 48 hours. I think he was wise to do so. But is there that kind of reflection and deliberation that is so important in the university environment? So universities must be prepared. They must also lead. They must confront threats to their missions and to their capacity to host speech and dialogue. This may require the occasional containment of some in our midst, and perhaps even discipline. It was interesting to me that, to the extent that I could find out, when you look at the examples that I have summarized, the students that were subject to discipline that went all the way through the university processes and then to the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench was the abortion demonstration at the University of Calgary. By the way, the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench eventually decided the case in the students' favor. And that was, but again, it was an external authority that held up the students' freedom of expression in that case. It wasn't the university debate. It wasn't the university senate. It was an external authority. By the way, as far as I could tell, no discipline was carried to final conclusion at Concordia or at the University of Ottawa, where these speeches were just stopped, full stop. So universities must lead on these matters, they must be prepared, and they must champion freedom of expression. The worry that I had in reading this chapter was that maybe freedom of expression is becoming one among the considerations that we must look to rather than the first principle in the university environment. But freedom of expression is absolutely vital to our mission. It's a paramount value, not simply one of many values. Thank you very much.